Hi, so in this video we will talk about gastrointestinal disorders in children, GI anomalies. Let's first talk about the esophageal atresia. So this esophageal atresia, there is a discontinuity in the esophagus because part of the esophagus is underdeveloped and not formed. Why is there a discontinuity? Because a part of esophagus is underdeveloped and not formed. Actions of associations of esophageal atresia. First one is the tracheoesophageal fistula, seen in 85% of the cases of the esophageal atresia. Second one is the bacterial association, in which the first one is the vertebral anomalies, second one is the anorectal malformations. C it stands for cardiac defects. T tracheoesophageal fistula, TE even tracheoesophageal fistula, and then from R it's renal anomalies, and from L it's limb defects. So this is bacterial association. Now coming to the clinical presentation of esophageal atresia. So there will be recurrent episodes of vomiting. They will be non-bilious, right? Because because the content is not reaching up to the duodenum, so it is not mixed with the bile. So it is non-bilious. Profuse drooling of the frothy saliva in the newborn, and during antenatal period, mother has history of polyhydramnios. Fine. So the clinical presentation of the esophageal atresia during antenatal period, mother has a history of what? Polyhydramnios. Okay. During intrauterine life, the fetus is unable to swallow the an amniotic fluid. This is leading to the polyhydramnios. Now the complication: repeated vomiting resulting in the aspiration of feed, causing aspiration pneumonitis. So in these children, there is a possibility of aspiration pneumonitis. Classification of the esophageal atresia with tracheoesophageal fistula. Gross classification involved five types of the tracheoesophageal fistula, out of which the type C is the most common one, and this one is the type C, in which the there is proximal esophageal atresia and the distal tracheoesophageal fistula. See, this is the proximal part which is atretic, and the distal part is connecting to the trachea. These are the other types. In type 1, type A, in which there is isolated esophageal atresia. Type B, in which there is proximal tracheoesophageal fistula with the distal esophageal atresia. Type C we already saw. In type D, the proximal and the distal end both are connected to the trachea. In type E or H, tracheoesophageal fistula without any esophageal atresia, just there is a connection with the trachea, forming an H shape. And the type F, there is esophageal stenosis. Moving ahead, proximal esophageal atresia with distal tracheoesophageal fistula. Fine. This was the type C one, which is being described here. In the type D, which is the least common type, and type E, the H-shaped, also called as the H-shaped tracheoesophageal fistula. Now, how do we diagnose this? During the routine checkup of the baby while inserting an nasogastric tube, a resistance is felt, and on the X-ray, the classical coiling of the tube can be seen. Fine. Diagnostic finding is the coiling of the NG tube in the upper esophagus. And what is the treatment for this tracheoesophageal fistula? Surgery is the definitive treatment, posterolateral thoracotomy, and repair of the defects. Fine, this needs to be done. What? Posterolateral thoracotomy and the repair of the defects. So the first condition that we read about is the esophageal atresia. Now the second thing that we are going to read about is the idiopathic hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. Let's start with this. What is happening in this disease, that there is hypertrophy of the circular muscle fibers in the pyloric region, causing narrowing at the pylorus. More common in the males than in the females. Of 4:1 incidence. Risk of the IHPS in the firstborn male is high. Male child is higher, and usage of the macrolides, erythromycin, either by the mother during pregnancy period or newborn baby, first 2 weeks is associated with the IHPS. So these were the risk factors for IHPS. First one was, it is more common in the male, and in fact in male firstborn male child the risk is higher, and use of macrolides either by the mother during pregnancy or by the newborn baby in the first 2 weeks is associated with the development of this idiopathic hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. Now coming to the features. There will be non-bilious forceful projectile vomiting after the feeds. Fine. Non-bilious because again the feed is not reaching up to the duodenum. There is a pyloric hypertrophy and there will be a projectile vomiting after the feeds. Second one is vomiting never starts immediately after birth. It appears 2 to 3 weeks after the birth. Fine. There is an epigastric olive-shaped swelling is usually noted after the vomiting episode. The olive-shaped swelling is noted after the vomiting episode, and there is a visible gastric peristalsis due to the increased force exerted by the stomach. Smooth muscles to overcome the obstruction, usually noted after the feeding, and usual direction of the peristalsis is from left to right side. Okay. So what are the features that we will see in a child with IHPS? Non-bilious projectile vomiting. Vomiting starts after 2 to 3 weeks after the birth. There is a olive-shaped swelling, and there will be a visible gastric peristalsis, and the peristalsis will be from the left to the right side. Moving ahead to the associations of IHPS. Jaundice is the first association seen due to the decreased activity of the enzyme UDP-GT, resulting in the increased unconjugated bilirubin and jaundice. Icteropyloric syndrome, that is jaundice plus IHPS, is called as the icteropyloric syndrome. Investigations for the IHPS. First one is the contrast X-ray. On the contrast X-ray, we can see the string sign, that is the narrow pyloric channel is seen on the contrast X-ray. A second one is the double track sign. Third one is the shoulder sign. The hypertrophic muscle bulges into the gastric antrum. Fourth one is the mushrooming, bulging of the hypertrophic muscle into the first part of the duodenum. These were all the contrast X-ray signs: the string sign, double track sign, shoulder sign, and the mushrooming. What is the investigation of choice? It's USG. In case of IHPS, we can see the thickness of the pyloric muscle, which is more than 4 mm, and the length of the pyloric channel is more than 16 mm. These are the diagnostic criteria for IHPS. Now, what is the treatment for IHPS? Manage the dehydration and electrolyte imbalances before the surgery of IHPS. In this patient, hypochloremia with metabolic alkalosis and hypokalemia is seen as HCl is vomited out. Fine. So, what is seen? Metabolic alkalosis, because HCl is vomited out, so there will be more. There will be decreased acid leading to metabolic alkalosis. Also, hypochloremia and hypokalemia. Fine, decrease in both these, chloride and potassium. Presence of hyponatremia in this patient initiates a conservation of sodium by reabsorption. Kidney excretes the H plus and K plus, therefore paradoxical aciduria is seen. Oh, so okay, so there is also presence of hyponatremia, and due to this hyponatremia, the patient initiates a conservation of sodium. And how is sodium being conserved? It is conserved by excreting, the kidneys excrete the H plus and K plus, and we already saw, right, there was hypochloremia and hypokalemia, and the kidneys excreting H plus and K plus, and therefore it is called as the paradoxical aciduria, that is hypokalemic hypochloremic metabolic alkalosis with paradoxical aciduria, because H plus is being excreted out. It is low and still being excreted out. That's why paradoxical. Dehydration, half NS plus K plus or ringer lactate is used for dehydration, and surgical treatment is by the Ramsted's pyloromyotomy for IHPS. Moving ahead to duodenal atresia. This is the third condition. First we saw the esophageal atresia, second IHPS, and third one is the duodenal atresia. Due to the failure of recanalization of duodenal lumen during the fetal development, so there is failure of recanalization. Genetic association for the duodenal atresia is seen in the Down syndrome. Fine. There is a syndromic association of duodenal atresia also with the Down syndrome. Now, in the Down syndrome, most common anomaly is endocardial cushion defect. So, in Down syndrome, the most common anomaly is the endocardial cushion defect, and the second most common anomaly are the GI anomaly and the duodenal atresia. 30% of the Down syndrome patients are associated with duodenal atresia. Okay, so 30% of Down syndrome are associated with duodenal atresia. Other associations of the duodenal atresia are: first one is the prematurity, second one is the congenital heart defects, which are seen in 30% of the cases. So, in duodenal atresia, other associations are prematurity and congenital heart defects. Features of the duodenal atresia. First one is the bilious vomiting will be seen soon after the birth. We saw in the IHPS that it presents after 2 to 3 weeks, but this uterine atresia, it presents soon after the birth. It is not associated with abdominal distension, and there is a maternal history will be significant for polyhydramnios, same as the IHPS one. Now in investigations, first in the X-ray, what we will see the double bubble sign. This is also seen in case of the annular pancreas and in the duodenal web also. Diagnostic modality is USG or CT imaging. Treatment is done by surgery, that is duodenostomy. Fine, this was all about duodenal atresia. What we read in duodenal atresia, that it is due to the failure of decanalization of the duodenal lumen, and there was association of the duodenal atresia with the Down syndrome. The most common anomaly in Down syndrome is the endocardial cushion defect, but the second most common anomaly is the GI anomaly and the duodenal atresia. 30% of the Down syndrome patients are associated with this duodenal atresia. Other associations of the duodenal atresia is the prematurity, congenital heart defects are seen in 30% of the cases. Features of the duodenal atresia are bilious vomiting seen soon after the birth, then abdominal distension and polyhydramnios on X-ray. Double bubble sign will be seen, and double bubble sign is also seen in the annular pancreas and the duodenal web. Surgery we saw. So, now the other condition that we are going to read about, the fourth condition, is the Meckel's diverticulum. Most common GI anomaly seen in 2% of the population. It is a remnant of what? Omphalomesenteric duct or the vitalointestinal duct. So this Meckel's diverticulum, it is a remnant. Fine. It is a remnant of what? Omphalomesenteric duct or the vitalointestinal duct. This is a true diverticulum, includes all the four layers of the GI tract. Its features are present in 2% of the population. Length of the Meckel's diverticulum is 2 inches, that is 5 centimeter. It is a it is 2 feet from the ileocecal junction at the anti-mesenteric border. This is important to remember that it is present on the anti-mesenteric border of the ileum. Fine. And it is lined by two types of the ectopic or the heterotopic mucosa, that is gastric mucosa, and then comes the pancreatic mucosa. Gastric mucosa and the pancreatic mucosa, two times more common in the females than in the males. Most of the cases are asymptomatic. If the child has symptoms, they usually appear before 2 years of the age and seen as painless rectal bleeds or bleeding at the time of stool passage. Fine. So Meckel's diverticulum, remember it as a in less than 2 years children as a differential diagnosis for bleeding at the time of passing of stool. Painless rectal bleeds are present, or this bleeding at the time of stool passage. Bleeding is due to the deep ileal ulcers caused by the hydrochloric acid secretion by the ectopic gastric mucosa. Fine, so there are deep ileal ulcers which cause the bleeding, and bleeding described as the current jelly stools or the melanotic bleeds or maroon bleeds. Other rare forms of the presentation include intestinal obstruction. These are all the rare forms of presentation of the Meckel's diverticulum. First one is the intestinal obstruction. It is due to Meckel's diverticulum acting as a lead point for interception, ileocholic interception. Fine. So this Meckel's diverticulum can act as a lead point for interception. Second, it rarely manifests as volvulus due to the twisting occurring by the fibrous band connecting the Meckel's diverticulum and the umbilicus. Fine, so there is a fibrous band connecting these Meckel's diverticulum and the umbilicus, and due to this twisting, these fibers can cause twisting leading to volvulus. Litter's hernia. When the Meckel's appear as a part of hernia sac, then it is called as the Litter's hernia. Intestinal obstruction due to interception is the most common presentation in adults. Fine. Diagnostic investigations for the Meckel's is Meckel's scan, that is technetium technetium 99M scan or the pertechnetate scintigraphy. Intestinal obstruction due to the intussusception is the most common presentation in the adults. That line just we already read. Now the diagnostic investigation for the Meckel's, that also we just read. This radionucleotide has high affinity for the gastric mucosa, therefore stomach and the ectopic Meckel's gastric mucosa shows increased uptake. Fine, because this has high affinity for the gastric mucosa, and we saw, right, there was ectopic mucosa was present, gastric mucosa. So because of that, this radionucleotide picks that up, and it shows increased uptake. Now, the treatment part of the Meckel's diverticulum, asymptomatic Meckel's is discovered as an incidental finding, and treatment is done if the Meckel's diverticulum has a narrow mouth or a narrow base. Then the diverticulectomy is done, or if the patient is symptomatic. These are the two conditions when the patient is treated for Meckel's diverticulum. Now, what we read in Meckel's was there is a rule of two, that it is a remnant of the omphalomyxanteric duct or the vital intestinal duct is a true diverticulum, and there is a rule of two, that it is present in the 2% of population, 2 inches long, 2 feet from the ileocecal junction, two types of mucosa, the gastric mucosa and the pancreatic mucosa, two times more common in the females, asymptomatic, and if it has to be symptomatic, then it is symptomatic within 2 years of the age, and it is seen as painless rectal bleeds or bleeding at the time of stool passage. Bleeding is due to the deep anal ulcers because of this ectopic gastric mucosa, and the bleeding is described as the current jelly stools or the melanotic bleeds or the maroon bleeds. Other rare forms of presentation include the intestinal obstruction and the volvulus or the Litter's hernia. For the treatment, we have to do only if the patient is symptomatic or the Meckel's diverticulum has a narrow mouth or a narrow base, then only diverticulectomy is done. Now, the fifth condition is the Hirschsprung's disease, also known as aganglionosis, absence of ganglions in the intestinal submucosal and muscular layers, Meissner's or Urbach's plexus. Occurs due to the failure of migration of neurons during the development and is known as neurocrystopathy. Due to the absence of ganglions, there is a failure of relaxation of the intestine. Therefore, the stool is unable to pass through the aganglionotic segment of the intestine. Therefore, the stools are stuck to the intestine proximal to the affected area. Fine. And it is more common in the males, 4:1 ratio, and most commonly affects the rectosigmoid area in 80% of the cases. What is affected in this Hirschsprung's disease? Rectosigmoid area is affected in 80% of the cases, named as the short segment disease because only short segment is affected. 15% cases appear as a long segment disease where areas proximal to the sigmoid gets affected. 5% of the cases, entire colon gets affected, total colon disease. It has association with the Down syndrome and mutations in the red proto-oncogene. Clinical features of this rectosigmoid area is always in a constricted state in newborns. This manifests as delay in the passage of meconium. Even after 48 hours of the birth, meconium is not being passed. There is abdominal distension. Rectum feels empty because of lack of stools, and withdrawal of the finger results in the sudden expulsion of the meconium. And in older children, constipation is seen. For investigation, rectal manometry, that is absence of recto-anal inhibitory reflex, is seen in the rectal manometry, and best investigation for the diagnosis is the rectal suction biopsy. What will be seen in that? The findings on the biopsy will be there will be hypertrophy of the nerve fibers, there will be absence of ganglion, and there will be increased staining activity of the acetylcholinesterase. For the treatment part of this Hirschsprung's disease, previously resection and anastomosis was done. Nowadays, a pull-through procedure is done. Normal part of the intestine is pulled through the aganglionic part and attached to the last part of the intestine, that is anus. So the normal part is pulled through that aganglionic part. There is a Duhamel procedure and a Soave procedure. That is the preferred procedure is the Soave procedure. In this procedure, first strip of the rectal mucosa, leaving behind the muscular part is left behind of the rectum, called as the muscular cuff. This muscular cuff provides a support to the proximal part of the intestine that would be joined to the distal part. So this was all about this GI anomaly video in which we read about 5 anomalies. Let's see which anomalies. First one was the esophageal atresia. Second we read about was the IHPS. Third one we read about was the duodenal atresia. Fourth we read about what is left. Meckel's diverticulum, right. And last one we read about the Hirschsprung's disease. Thank you. In the next video we will read about diarrhea.